Good evening and welcome. Tonight, let the world fade away as we journey to a quiet, flickering tavern by the sea. Here, Captain Lysandra meets a mysterious cartographer who holds a map to the impossible, a path to the edge of the sky. Relax, close your eyes, and let this tale of adventure and wonder carry you gently toward rest. Let's begin. The tavern was nearly empty, shadows pooling in the corners, and lamplight flickering across Captain Lysandra's face. She leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the ancient navigator who sat opposite her. His skin lined like old maps, his eyes dark and unreadable. The tavern door creaked open as another patron left, the scent of salt air slipping in, mingling with the smell of rum and tobacco. The navigator, known only as the cartographer, held a bundle wrapped in leather across his lap. For a man whose legends traced across every sea from here to the frigid reaches of the north, he looked strangely reluctant, as though what he held was no mere map but a curse. Lysandra watched as his hands trembled slightly, fingers worn and calloused from years of charting seas no one else dared sail. She was patient, but her heart beat like the distant thunder she loved to chase. "You don't understand, Captain," he finally said, his voice a low rasp. "There are seas you can sail forever, land where no horizon ever rises. But the edge of the sky, that's a place not meant for our kind." His words lingered in the air, a warning she felt more than heard. But Lysandra was no ordinary captain. Her father had been a sailor who vanished at sea, leaving her with little more than a compass and the promise that she'd see wonders he could only dream of. She wore his compass now, the metal worn smooth, gleaming faintly in the tavern light. "Show me," she said, her voice quiet but edged with steel. With a sigh that seemed to carry centuries of regret, the cartographer untied the leather straps and unfolded the map on the rough wooden table. It was no ordinary map. Each line glowed faintly, a tracery of constellations and winding paths that seemed to lead upward, not across the familiar seas, but into the heavens. The ink was deep blue, and where it met paper, stars seemed to pulse, like they might lift from the page if one only dared touch them. "Here," the cartographer murmured, pointing to a series of spirals leading into empty space. "This is the path to the sky's edge, where the ocean mingles with the heavens. They say if you sail this course, the stars themselves will guide your ship upward. But beware, Captain, the map is only the beginning. The sky is a place of secrets." Lysandra traced her finger along the lines, feeling a shiver run through her. She could almost hear the winds shifting, whispering through the night air, calling her toward the unknown. "What lies at the sky's edge?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The cartographer's eyes clouded, his gaze distant. "A city," he replied, his voice like a shadow. "A place that floats above the world, held aloft by the stars themselves. It is said that those who find it will see wonders that make jewels and gold look like mere stones. A murmur rose in Lysandra's chest, something that felt like the heartbeat of adventure and something else, a fear she hadn't felt in years. She brushed it aside, focusing on the lure of that floating city, imagining towers spun from crystal and bridges of starlight. "I'll take the map," she said. The cartographer closed his eyes briefly, as though letting go of something precious. When he opened them again, they were wet with a tear that glinted like the stars etched on his map. "Then may the winds be kinder to you than they were to me, Captain." She took the map, folding it with the care it deserved, and slipped it into her coat pocket. The air around her felt charged, electric, as though the stars themselves were watching. With a nod to the cartographer, she stood, the table creaking beneath her shifting weight. As she stepped out of the tavern, the night sky stretched above her, vast and endless, filled with constellations that seemed brighter than ever. She could feel the map pressing against her chest, a promise pulsing through her veins, guiding her toward a path where few dared tread. The crew was waiting at the docks, murmuring amongst themselves. They watched her approach, sensing the change in her step, the fire in her eyes. "Captain!" called her first mate, a grizzled man named Torin, as he noted the gleam in her eyes. "What's our heading?" "To the edge of the sky," she replied, her voice both thrill and challenge. Torin's face twisted in confusion, but he held his silence. The crew, sensing adventure and mystery, let out a cheer. The ship, the Starcatcher, was ready, her sails full and waiting. Lysandra stepped aboard, and with a final glance at the world she knew, she gave the order. "Set sail," she called, "to where the stars kiss the sea." As the ship slipped into the night, gliding across the calm waters, Lysandra felt the map's warmth against her chest. She was no longer just a captain. She was a traveller bound for a place where the heavens held their secrets close. The stars seemed to blink in recognition, and in the silence, the sea carried her forward toward the edge of the sky. It was on the fourth night that the sea began to change. The crew of the Starcatcher watched in silence as the waves turned from their familiar dark blue to a shimmering silver, a colour that seemed to capture starlight itself. Lysandra stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the horizon where water met sky, a line that grew less distinct with every passing hour. Her hand clutched the compass her father had left her, but tonight it spun aimlessly, as if even it couldn't make sense of this strange voyage. The wind had a strange weight, carrying a scent unlike any they'd known, a mixture of cold steel and wildflowers, of distant storms, and the faint electric tang of lightning. The sails swelled, lifting the ship higher with each gust, and the crew gripped the railings, uncertain if they were rising or falling. Lysandra, however, felt the thrill of the unknown growing in her chest. They were on the path to the sky's edge, and the air buzzed with the promise of wonders. As midnight approached, the clouds thickened, swirling in spirals that glowed with an eerie light. Above them, the stars seemed closer, their light brighter, sharper, as if watching the ship's ascent. Lysandra felt her heart quicken. She was no longer simply sailing a ship. She was a thread woven into some celestial tapestry, a voyager in a realm only dreamt of. "Captain!" Torin called, his voice gruff yet laced with awe. What kind of place is this?" Lysandra glanced at her first mate, his eyes wide as he took in the strange, silver sea and the luminous clouds above. "It's the way to the floating city," she replied, her voice firm but soft, as if afraid her words might disturb whatever ancient magic guided them. The ship rose, lifted by winds that didn't behave like any they'd encountered. These gusts didn't rush forward. Instead, they seemed to cradle the Starcatcher, lifting it like a precious vessel toward a hidden realm. The waters below began to thin, and as Lysandra peered over the edge, she realized they were no longer riding on waves, but on a glistening mist that sparkled with faint points of light. Time felt strange, stretching and folding like the clouds around them. They sailed through endless twilight, neither night nor day, a realm caught between. The crew whispered among themselves, trying to understand the wonders surrounding them. Strange flocks of birds flew past, their feathers glinting like silver, and on the horizon, shifting shapes moved. Creatures of shadow and light that seemed to melt into the air. Lysandra kept her gaze steady, though her heart pounded with wonder and the smallest hint of fear. Hours, or perhaps days, passed. The sky became denser with stars, constellations Lysandra didn't recognize blinking down at them as if they were strangers in this celestial realm. She could feel her heart pulsing in rhythm with something vast and ancient, as if the skies themselves acknowledged their presence, watching, waiting. It was then that the first storm came. Dark clouds gathered swiftly, swirling into a vortex ahead, lightning flashing in silent bursts. The air grew thick with a hum, and the crew scrambled to secure the ship, tying ropes and adjusting sails, their movements quick but hesitant. Lysandra held her ground, gripping the helm, her eyes fixed on the storm. She had faced tempest before, but this was different. A storm alive with purpose, its winds carrying murmurs in a language she couldn't understand. The ship bucked as it entered the storm, and a sharp wind sliced through the sails, filling the air with the scent of ozone. Lysandra felt the storm reach out to her, as though testing her resolve. Lightning arced across the sky, illuminating the faces of her crew, their expressions twisted in awe and terror. "Hold steady!" Lysandra shouted, her voice fierce, cutting through the roar of the wind. The ship dipped, plunging into the heart of the storm. Rain fell in sheets, but it wasn't like any rain they knew. Each drop glowed faintly, filling the air with ghostly light. The crew huddled close, clinging to each other and the ship, their voices drowned by the storm's whispering. Lysandra's knuckles were white on the helm as she guided the Starcatcher through the tempest, feeling every pull, every shift of the sky tides. Just as the storm reached its peak, as the lightning flashed closest and the wind screamed around them, the clouds broke, parting to reveal a clear stretch of sky. Lysandra breathed, the cold air filling her lungs like ice. She looked ahead, and her heart stopped. There, floating just beyond the clearing of clouds, was the city. It rose like a vision, towers spiraling into the night, bridges stretching across the stars themselves. The buildings shimmered, their walls spun from something that glinted like crystal and silver, catching the light from above. It was beautiful, otherworldly, a place that didn't belong in any map or memory. Behind her, the crew gasped, their eyes wide as they took in the sight of the floating city. The treasure that had drawn them through storms and strange seas. Lysandra felt a thrill race through her, a sense of triumph, of having reached a place where few dared go dot. The edge of the sky had welcomed them, but Lysandra knew deep down that this city held secrets, and that those secrets might come with a price. She stood tall, her gaze fixed on the city, and took a steadying breath. The adventure had only just begun. The Starcatcher drifted forward, carried by a gentle current as it approached the floating city. A hush fell over the crew, their voices lost in the immensity of this sky-bound marvel. The city loomed ahead, larger and more intricate than they had imagined. Towers spiraled upwards, gleaming like spun glass, their tips disappearing into clouds lit by the glow of distant stars. Bridges arched between them, delicate threads that seemed to ripple as if made from mist and moonlight. Lysandra stepped forward, her boots echoing on the deck as she approached the ship's bow. Her heart was heavy with awe, each beat resonating with the strange, silent beauty that surrounded them. She could feel the city's energy reaching out to her, a pulse as ancient as the stars, as if it had been waiting centuries for someone to arrive. "Captain," whispered Torin, his voice reverent. "It's like nothing I've ever seen." She nodded, her eyes never leaving the city. She felt its pull, a mysterious allure that defied words, urging her onward. "Prepare to dock," she said softly, her voice carried away on the light breeze. Her words felt small, insignificant against the vastness of the place before them, but they filled the crew with purpose. They moved in silence, securing ropes and lowering the anchor. As the ship drew closer, Lysandra noticed something odd. There was no sign of life. The city lay still, empty, yet it was alive with an energy that hummed in the air, a song of longing and forgotten dreams. She felt as though they were intruders in a sacred place, an ancient realm of secrets. When the Starcatcher finally docked, Lysandra led the way, stepping off the ship onto a bridge that shimmered beneath her feet. The material was cool and smooth, glowing faintly under her touch. It felt like stepping onto starlight itself, as though each step took her deeper into a dream. They moved carefully through the city, their eyes wide, hearts pounding. The streets were lined with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change with each glance. Pillars stood tall, etched with symbols that flickered like embers. The crew whispered among themselves, marveling at the beauty and strangeness of it all. There was treasure here, yes, but not the kind they had expected. Instead of gold and jewels, they found artifacts that pulsed with energy. Crystal orbs, celestial compasses, and silver maps that glinted in the dark, as if lit from within. One of the crew, a young sailor named Mira, reached out to touch an orb that lay in a small alcove. The moment her fingers brushed it, the orb lit up, casting a soft blue glow across her face. She gasped, stepping back as a shadow shifted at the edge of their vision. Lysandra turned, her hand instinctively moving to the hilt of her sword. The shadow took shape, coalescing into a figure draped in silver and shadow, its form ethereal yet undeniably real. It was a woman, or something resembling one, her eyes glowing like starlight, her hair a cascade of silver mist. "Welcome, travelers," she said, her voice a whisper that filled the air, wrapping around them like fog. "You have found what many seek, but few ever reach." The crew stood frozen, captivated by the figure's presence. Lysandra felt a shiver run down her spine, a sense of wonder mixed with the sharp edge of caution. She stepped forward, meeting the gaze of the spectral woman. "Are you the guardian of this place?" The figure inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "I am Zephyra, last keeper of the floating city. I protect its secrets and its treasures, guarding them from those who seek to possess what cannot be owned." Lysandra's heart quickened. She felt the weight of her ambition pressing against her, the desire to claim a piece of this wonder for herself and her crew. But Zephyra's gaze was piercing, a warning glinting in the depths of her eyes. "Why do you protect this city?" Lysandra asked, her voice steady, though she felt her pulse quicken. "There's no one left here but you." Zephyra's eyes grew distant, her gaze unfocused as though seeing beyond this realm. This city was built by those who understood the stars, those who learned to weave the skies into their very walls. They left long ago, leaving behind only memories and echoes. But the treasures they left are bound to this place, tied to the heavens. To take them is to risk all that you are. A murmur rose among the crew, a mixture of awe and fear. Lysandra felt her resolve waver, yet she couldn't let go of the thought of the powerful artifact she had glimpsed. a wind compass that glowed brighter than the rest, resting in a chamber nearby. What would happen, she asked carefully, if we took one thing? A small relic, perhaps? Zephyr's gaze softened, but the warning lingered. Choose wisely, Captain, for some treasures cost far more than gold. And with that, she faded back into the shadows, leaving Lysandra and her crew standing in the stillness of the city, a choice weighing heavily on their hearts. Silence fell over the city after Zephyr vanished, her final words hanging in the air like a distant echo. Lysandra felt the weight of them pressing down on her, a caution that tugged at her ambition, yet couldn't quite extinguish it. Her fingers itched to hold that celestial compass she had glimpsed, to wield something forged from stardust and sky. She knew it would make her the most formidable captain alive, a master of the winds, ruler of the seas. Yet Zephyr's warning clung to her thoughts. To take from this place was to bind oneself to the sky, a fate as wondrous as it was terrifying. Her crew shifted around her, uncertain but drawn, like moths to the light of the floating city's treasures. They whispered to each other in low voices, their eyes darting to the orbs and relics that pulsed softly in the shadowed alcoves. Their faces held the same mix of longing and trepidation, a tension that mirrored Lysandra's own inner struggle. Tauren, her first mate, approached her, his face unreadable. "Captain, you heard what the Guardian said. These treasures aren't like gold or jewels. They're bound to this place. Perhaps we should leave them be." Lysandra turned to him, her gaze steady. She saw the loyalty in his eyes, the unwavering trust he held in her judgment, and it only made the decision harder. "I know, Tauren," she said softly, "but imagine what even one of these artifacts could mean for us, for the Starcatcher. With that compass we could navigate storms, find lands others can't dream of reaching. We'd be legends." He hesitated, glancing at the pulsing orbs and shimmering relics. She could see the lure of it in his eyes, but also the fear. "And if we lose ourselves in the process?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lysandra looked away, her gaze falling on the compass, nestled on a pedestal in the center of a vast empty hall. Its surface glowed faintly, the glass etched with constellations that shifted as though alive. She could almost hear its call, a siren song woven into the hum of the floating city. Suddenly, the air grew colder, a stillness settling that felt heavier than the silence before. Shadows lengthened, and a voice spoke from the darkness, a whisper as soft as silk, yet sharp as steel. "You seek power," the voice murmured. Zephyr's form coalesced in front of them once more, her eyes darker, her figure more substantial, as if she had drawn strength from their doubts. "But power here is bound by the stars, by the ancient forces that hold this city. You cannot take it without paying the price." Lysandra squared her shoulders, meeting the Guardian's gaze. What is the price? Zephyr's expression was unreadable, her face a mask of stardust and shadows. You may find that the power you take will change you, Captain. Those who wield the sky's magic become part of it. Their hearts beat with the rhythm of the stars, but they lose the world below. Lysandra's heart raced, but she held her ground. What does that mean? The Guardian's gaze softened, a glimmer of pity in her eyes. It means you will become like this city, bound to the heavens, a part of the stars. You may never return to the world as you know it. The weight of Zephyr's words settled on Lysandra's shoulders. She felt her ambition waver, a small crack forming in the armor of her determination. The thought of being tied to the stars, never again to see the rolling seas, the land, or even the faces of her crew, felt like a fate both grand and desolate. Behind her the crew murmured, their fear growing. Lysandra could feel their eyes on her, their trust, their lives held in the balance of her decision. They had followed her to the edge of the sky, braving storms and the unknown. But this was different. This was a choice between their lives and the lure of something beyond their understanding. Finally, she looked at Zephyra, her voice steady but tinged with regret. I understand the risk, and I will not make it lightly. She turned to her crew, searching their faces. She could see the relief, the gratitude mixed with lingering wonder. But there in the distance, her eyes fell on the celestial compass again, and the fire within her flared. She would leave it, she told herself. But just one last glance, a reminder of the treasure they had found and left untouched. As she approached, she felt a pull, something irresistible, like the grip of gravity or the call of the open sea. She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the compass, and in that instant, she felt a surge of warmth, a heartbeat that pulsed in her hand, and she gasped, pulling back. Zephyr's voice echoed in the hall, soft but firm. You have chosen well, Captain. The true treasure is in knowing when to let go. Lysandra's hand fell to her side, the pull fading. She turned to her crew, their faces softened by relief and quiet admiration. Together they walked back toward the ship, their hearts full, their minds brimming with the memories of a city beyond the edge of the sky, where wonders lived only for those brave enough to find them, and wise enough to leave them be. And as they departed, the city watched, its lights dimming, knowing it had shared its secrets with those who would carry them, not in their hands, but in their hearts. The journey back to the Starcatcher felt longer than the way in, each step echoing with the memory of treasures and shadows. Lysandra walked in silence, her mind lingering on Zephyr's warning and the brief, electric touch of the celestial compass. It was as though the city itself breathed around them, watching with silent approval, sensing that they would leave its secrets untouched. Once aboard, the crew stood waiting, eyes filled with awe and relief. their gazes shifting between their captain and the distant spires of the floating city. Toran approached, his rough hand resting gently on Lysandra's shoulder. "You made the right choice, Captain," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We came here to see, and we saw more than most ever dream. That's enough." She nodded, though her heart still hummed with a faint ache, a lingering sense of unfinished longing. To walk away from such power, to turn her back on a destiny that had felt so close. It was both freeing and painful, like pulling against a thread that had been woven into her very soul. "Let's return home," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of strength and sorrow. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease as she gave the order, her mind already starting to let go of the city that gleamed behind them like a distant constellation. As the ship set sail, the air grew colder, the light of the floating city fading into the mist. The sky tides carried them gently downward, back to the world they had left, though the journey felt different this time. The wind seemed to caress the Starcatcher with a quiet reverence, as though they too understood the sacrifice the crew had made. The night deepened, stars blinking out one by one as clouds began to gather. Lysandra stood at the helm, watching the heavens shift, feeling the familiar pull of gravity reclaiming them. Yet something else was different, a warmth in her heart, a faint glow she hadn't noticed before. It was subtle, like a memory of the city itself imprinted on her soul, as though it had left her with a piece of its magic, a gift for those who knew when to leave with empty hands. "Captain," called Mira, the young sailor, her voice carrying a note of urgency. "Look!" Lysandra turned to see that the stars were shifting, forming a pattern that seemed almost familiar. It was the outline of the city, its towers and bridges traced in starlight, hovering in the sky above them, as though offering a final farewell. The crew gathered, watching in silence, their faces softened with wonder. Lysandra felt the pull of the city one last time, a whisper that promised worlds beyond the one she knew. But as the stars resumed their usual constellations, she felt a calm settle within her, a certainty that she had made the choice not just for herself, but for her crew and the life that awaited them. The descent continued, the ship sinking gently through layers of mist and night, until they broke through the clouds, the familiar endless ocean stretching out below. The vastness of it was a comfort, an embrace that felt like home. As they touched down on the water's surface, the waves lapped against the hull, a steady rhythm that grounded them back in the reality they had known. The crew let out a quiet cheer, a mixture of relief and pride, their voices carrying over the waves. Lysandra stood at the helm, feeling the weight of the journey settle within her. She looked out at her crew, their faces alight with something deeper than satisfaction. They had glimpsed the mysteries of the heavens and returned whole, bearing only the stories they would carry for the rest of their lives. As dawn crept over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sea, Toran joined her at the helm, his eyes thoughtful. "You think we'll ever see it again, Captain?" She smiled, the faintest hint of sadness in her gaze. "Maybe. Or maybe it'll find someone else worthy of its secrets one day. But we've seen enough for a lifetime." They sailed onward, leaving the memory of the floating city behind, yet carrying it with them in ways they couldn't quite explain. Lysandra felt the weight of her choice settle in her bones, a decision that felt as much a part of her now as her compass, as her ship. The Starcatcher cut through the waves, her sails filled with the gentle breeze of dawn. The crew returned to their duties, but they moved with a quiet reverence, a shared understanding that their lives had been touched by something beyond measure. As they sailed back toward the familiar, Lysandra allowed herself one last look at the sky, at the endless expanse that stretched far beyond what she could see. The stars were fading with the morning light, but she knew they were still there, watching, waiting, holding the secrets of the heavens for those daring enough to seek them. And though she would never again touch the compass of starlight or walk the bridges spun from dreams, she felt the magic of the floating city pulse within her, a reminder that some treasures were meant to be found and some to be left as mysteries forever.